Hi, I'm Jonathan Ward.
I'm Kimberly Lane.
I'm Sonia Jante. Together, we're unlocking leadership. We're three experienced executive coaches with very different disciplines. In every episode, we take a question from a real client and provide key insights to address their challenge from our three different perspectives. It is a holistic approach to understand challenges and opportunities. Let's get to it. Our question today is from Davin in New York City. I want to learn more about power in business. Why do some people have it and others don't? Jonathan, what should Davin know about having power in business?
Wow, Davin, that's a wonderful question. And I tell you what, it's one of those things we certainly know power when we see it. And sometimes there's power going on that we're not even quite aware of. You know, from a textbook standpoint, they will tell you that there are three basic sources of power. There's your position power based on where you are in the organization. There's an expertise or a knowledge power that you get from being an expert in a certain field, like being a computer programmer or something like that. But what I find is the biggest source of power is relationship power. And this is the power that you get by having a network of people throughout an organization. And the higher you move up in an organization, the more important that relationship power becomes. The more complex your job, the more you need that relationship power rather than relying on position or expertise power. So it's really important for you to be able to identify who the key people are in an organization that are your key stakeholders, the people with influence and things like that, and build relationships with those people. And through that kind of interpersonal skill and developing those relationships, then you start to develop a power within the organization. And the good news about learning how to develop relationship power is that that goes with you no matter where you go. Even if you leave your company and go somewhere else, that kind of interpersonal power that helps you connect with people is a really good source for building your own personal power in the world. What else do you all think?
Yeah, I was kind of looking at the fact that, yes, Davin, people are assigned a power, if you will, by their role or title or hierarchical position in an organization. But I sense what you're really looking for is, why do some people have the ability to just naturally lead and guide others, and others want to power, that people see this person have referent power, if you will, that they enjoy being around them. They like their expertise. They trust them implicitly, right? And I think that referent power really comes over consistency over time, kind of what you mentioned, Jonathan, in the essence of a relationship. You as a person have consistently proved your trustworthiness, your ability to collaborate and to care what other people think, summarize that together, and then still lead effectively by having considered everybody else's opinions, but having been also in more of a maybe a manager or leader role, you were able to take that insight from everybody else and then respectfully, make a decision that leads the team proactively on a best decision, right? So it's really about, I think, consistently showing up, integrous, trustworthy, vulnerable, empathetic, collaborative, listening to people, knowing your team, knowing your people. And I just think over time, you will become that referent power where people just respect you because you've consistently performed. You consistently lead on high values, great direction for the company, for your position. And I think that's kind of what you're looking for. And I think that just comes over time in that relationship power that Jonathan, you mentioned about, of just continually to show who you are and how you work with people, and people will just gravitate towards that.
So I'm going to share a tool for Davin, and it's called Power. It's by Jeffrey Pfeffer, and it's why some people have it and others don't. And he's a professor out here in Southern California. He teaches at USC. He's written several books, and one of the things that I would say is typical of him is he tries to give you the real story. He tries to get to the backstory, what's really going on in the world, kind of thing of business and leadership. And so I'm going to share a couple of stories that he shares, and I'm going to give a couple of examples of what he thinks is important to build power. And I can share these stories because I've come across the same experience, and so I agree with him. And one of them has to do that a lot about having power and influence is to be able to understand what is it that your bosses want in order to be successful. So his theory is that basically when you please your boss, even if all the other things you're doing are wrong, it's very rare that you're going to get fired because your boss sees you as delivering what it is that they need. And, one of the questions that I often ask when I'm beginning to coach somebody is, were you selected by the boss you're currently working with? Because there is this natural bias to the person that we selected and that we were working with. Another piece that he talks about that I think is true and is important is where you launch yourself to be in power can also make a difference. And so he points out that looking at every department in an organization is important, but there's some departments that are more powerful than others. And potentially they're more powerful than others because of that's the business design, but they might end up being more powerful for you if in many cases you don't have to compete with as many people within that group because you're bringing in something new to the equation. So if you have like a different background that comes in to the story that matters, then you're able to, if you will, negotiate certain situations for power that maybe other people might not. He used an example of somebody in Silicon Valley who wanted to get into an organization that was a startup or close to a startup. And there was a lot of engineers. And what she happened to be was a business person that also was an attorney. And so she figured that she could show them how valuable her skill set was, even though she didn't have an engineering degree. But in terms of the challenges that they were going to be facing, that they could see that how she could contribute, how she could make a difference. And in essence, as they began to realize what she could bring to the table, what kinds of areas she was responsible for, when she asked for the CEO job, they gave it to her. So it's, things that you don't often think about, but and his thing was, she realized that if she'd gone to try to go compete in just a normal business environment or with a lot of other attorneys, she might not stand out. But in this particular situation, she would. So something to think about in that regard. The last thing is I would say, what are the 7 personal qualities that he looks at for building power? In many cases, both Jonathan and Kimberly have addressed them, but I'm just going to bring it up. And I think the first one is ambition. The question you have to ask yourself is, can you see yourself in a position of authority and responsibility? Because many times we don't, we just take whatever was given to us. And so you have to be ambitious to begin with. Energy. I've not seen too many leaders that don't have energy that lasts. Focus. We've talked about focus before. Self-knowledge. How well do you really know yourself? Because this is where you really have to understand what you don't know how to do or what you're not really good at so that you can provide, if you will, the right balance and the right group to work with you. Confidence, that's always very important. Empathy with others, which Kimberly's often addressed. And then lastly is the capacity to deal with conflict. Because there is no journey in the business world on the way up that won't involve conflict. And so I always say, do you have a nice toolkit of conflict resolution skills that you can bring to the table? Because you will be tested, and you will be tested by both people that have good intentions and not such good intentions. And you can't shy away from a conflict. You've got to decide you're going to handle it. So anyway, that's sort of a little bit of advice and a tool to take a look at. Lots of full of good stories there.
That's wonderful. One of the things I think about too is, think about somebody that you consider to be somebody who is a powerful person who you admire and respect. And what is it about that person that you see them doing or not doing that you would want to emulate? And that's maybe one of the things to think about for your own self about, how can I be more like Abraham Lincoln or something like that? Just think about, what does that person do? How do they speak? How do they carry themselves? What's important to them? And that can be the kind of thing that can help you really connect with the power that you might have as well.
Yeah, and I want to kind of take it back to when you were talking about relationship power, and then I also was talking about the referent power. It's really kind of important to you'll see that power, if you will, when you listen and talk to the teams that they lead or the employees, because of the praise they give, the loyalty they have, and just any other response that they give, right? That's really going to be defining versus you asking that person about how much power they have, but really seeing the team around them, the people around them, and the words they use to describe that person, or in this, in your case, describe you, right? How were your peers? How would other leaders describe you? That will tell you how much power you have, right? And that goes back to what Jonathan was talking about, building that relationship, trusting power that comes over time and building those great relationships and going up. But Sonia, I really like the book you brought up too. I think that's got some really, really great
Yeah,
points.
it's chock full of good things. I think the thing that
Yeah.
you brought up that I love is the fact that it's about listening. I think that you can't overemphasize that. I was just conducting a 360 for a leader, and part of the consistent feedback. And I was interviewing people. She leads a global organization, so they were all over the world from different cultures. And the consistent thing was, she's actually genuine. And I said, so how do you know that? And they go, she doesn't do management speak.
She's not trying to.
We don't realize
all the time, right? That tells the truth, right?
Yeah. We're so attached to that when somebody is refreshing, they tell us how it really is. It's like, oh my gosh, they don't do management speak.
I guess the other thing too, we're talking about the listening is to really kind of understand what's important in your organization. What are the things that the company or the organization is attempting to accomplish? Your boss, their bosses, and to the extent you can make that kind of thing happen, you become a much more powerful person within the organization rather than advancing your own agenda.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, and there's, and power doesn't have to just be by one individual. I think today there needs to be more collective power versus just one individual who seems to have the power, right? I think it's, I think collectively as a team, or with your peers, I think there's power in that too, right? And having a common passion, a common vision, alignment in strategies and goals for the company, et cetera. I mean, that's a whole nother type of power, right? That we could talk about.
One other thing I wanted to add that was an interesting way of distinguishing power. Again, another client that I was working with, and they were describing that when something is in the early stages of being defined, that's when the person has to apply hard power. That means a little bit more directive, a little bit more, I'm the one in charge, I'm the one that's making something happen. As the project starts moving down the track and they're now beginning to actually have to implement it, and in this case, it's a creative project, he said, you have to move into soft power or you lose them. And I thought, oh, wow. He says, yeah. So at that point in time is where Kimberly says, now it's the collective power. This is about everybody in the room. I'm not the only one with all the great ideas. What do you guys think? And then the product will come out better. And so I thought that's a nice sort of contrast and definition. Am I needing to apply soft power or strong power or hard power at this point?
Fantastic. Any other comments?
No,
great question. Well, thank you very much, Davin from New York City, for your question today. We hope you and our viewers and listeners have learned what differentiates the leaders with power in business. To our listeners, if you like the content we shared today, please like this episode and also share and subscribe on our YouTube channel, Unlocking Leadership-AskTheCoaches.com. We look forward to hearing your reviews. You can also find Unlocking Leadership Ask the Coaches on Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast platform. If you do have a leadership question for us or would like to reach out to our coaches, please email us at info@unlockingleadership-askthecoaches.com. We would love to hear from you. Thanks for joining us today, and tune in next time to find the keys to unlocking your best leadership.